the 24th of July, and Moscow city is under attack. Emergency evacuation of the business center is starting right now. Thousands of employees are fleeing their workplaces. The warriors are striking the centers of Moscow and St. Petersburg with Ukrainian ballistic missiles and Western rockets.
Whoa! That was an absolutely incredible hit. Holy cow, that was truly amazing, a truly powerful and impactful strike. Damn, that was really something else.
At this very moment, Moscow City is switching its employees to remote work. Only security and a couple of duty staff remain in VTB central office. All this is happening against the backdrop of drone attacks and the threat of direct hits on the towers. American JASSM missiles and possibly Tomahawks will be heading for the Kremlin. Moscow City is under attack. An emergency evacuation of the business center is starting right now. Thousands of employees are fleeing their workplaces. Trump has authorized strikes on Moscow and St. Petersburg. Both Moscow and the Moscow region are being attacked by Ukrainian troops. Boom, bada boom. By the way, where did you land? Something's burning over there. That's odd. Donald Trump privately suggested to Zelensky to strike Moscow and St. Petersburg. The new US president is convinced only strikes on Russian cities will force the Kremlin to come to the negotiating table. At this very moment, Moscow City is switching its employees to remote work. Only security and a couple of staff on duty remain at VTB's central office. All this is happening against the backdrop of new drone attacks and the threat of direct hits on the towers. And all of this marks a new phase of the war. And we are witnessing Russia truly afraid for the first time. What kind of signal did Trump send? Which missiles could be supplied to Ukraine, JASSM or Tomahawks? Why is Putin running and why is Moscow trembling? We'll discuss all of this with top analyst Alexander Demchenko right now. Friends, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Sasha and I work together twice a week on my YouTube channel. Sasha, the main question is what happens now?
A strike on Moscow. In the coming days, Moscow is preparing. It's not for nothing that Moscow City is being evacuated, everyone. Is being sent to work remotely. It's not for nothing that official Z bloggers, war correspondents, even the authorities, the military and generals have started saying that yes, there will be a combined missile and drone strike directly on Moscow. In other words, they are preparing for retaliation, for a harsh response. We discussed with you just this week that a harsh response is expected any day now. I said before, wait 10 days, there will be a response. And here you go. Trump gave 50 days, but I gave 10. And as you can see, I was right. I assessed the situation a bit more accurately than maybe even Donald Trump. Just kidding, of course. The point is, there will be a response. There will be a harsh strike. Moscow is preparing for this. Most likely, for the first time, Moscow will be set ablaze of those Patricks. All of Rubliovka will burn. They don't feel the war there, you see? Many people here ask me, but Kyiv is being hit very often. Representatives of the Russian political immigrants ask me this question. But Kyiv is being hit, yet Kyiv keeps functioning, standing, living, and so on. I say yes, but Kyiv feels that the war has long since come to the Ukrainian capital. But Moscow doesn't feel that yet. Now they're going to feel it 100%. Everyone will feel it. Dmitry Medvedev, who, after getting drunk, started talking about how Trump is just decorative with his statements. The only one who's decorative is Dmitry Anatolievich Medvedev. In terms of his height, his intellectual abilities, the way he managed to drink away his power in a single night, his cowardice is decorative in all of that, and especially in how he's now sucking up to Putin, afraid that he'll be taken out. Twitter this way, Twitter that way. You see, one moment he criticizes Trump, the next he praises him. It all depends on Vladimir Putin's mood. This is a man who drank away his power in a single night and handed it over to Putin and Patrushev by the lake. All because he was afraid they'd drown him. In just one night, and now he's talking about being decorative. There is no one more decorative in the Russian power structure than Dmitry Medvedev. This is something you can just remember for the rest of your life. Just carve it in stone for yourself, wherever you like. That's the first thing. Second, of course, the fact that they're now switching to remote work, it's not just, military enterprises, but Moscow City, an elite complex with office spaces where Viktor Yanukovych's son has offices, where Kurchenko has offices, where a huge number of Russian security officials, FSB agents have offices. where Bashar Assad and his family have an apartment. This suggests that most likely they are going to shoot things down. They want to shoot things down, and they don't care where they do it. It's obvious that their goal is to prevent drones from hitting the Kremlin or any other important military targets, military facilities, like the general staff on Frunzenskaya near Batwell. It's actually right on Arba. In other words, what we have been discussing and predicting with you, Dasha, over the past weeks or even months is starting to come true. Many people might have thought we were crazy, that I was making things up. Number. Well, here you go, no drones and missiles will be flying. It's not just Daria and I saying this. They're saying this over there. In Russia, Gerasimov is saying it. The whole propaganda pack is proclaiming it. Everyone, absolutely everyone. Go ahead. Moscow will say whatever Trump says. Why aren't you striking Moscow? You said it correctly in the preview. Why aren't you striking Moscow? There's no weapons. Give us weapons and we'll strike. All right. Well, then don't just strike Moscow. Hit St. Petersburg too. So the Americans are raising the stakes. It's just that Putin went all in. And Trump thought, well, fine, but I've got more Trump cards me. Last name literally means Trump. So why don't I make my move? And he did. Now he's already considering supplying Tomahawks to Ukraine. And that's the weapon that pierced 2 nuclear facilities in Iran. Tomahawks 30, Tomahawk 10. There are no more nuclear plants in Iran. So why do we think there couldn't be several nuclear plants on Russian territory destroyed after a Tomahawk strike? Now, JASSM, air-to-air missiles and ballistic missiles will be sent here to Ukraine. And we're saying that most likely Donald Trump gave a signal, quite a public one, at that showing everything openly, demonstrating to Vladimir Putin that within 50 days, and perhaps even exactly 50 days, just as it happened with the US-Israeli agreement, yes, the arrangement, now as well, in 50 days, catastrophic strikes on Moscow will follow. And now there will be combined strikes, drone and missile attacks. But in 50 days, the lights over Moscow will simply be turned off. And the lights over Russia will be turned off. And the lights over Vladimir Putin's regime will also go out. It's long overdue. And if even Trump is asking, why aren't you striking yet? So it means that an idea has formed in his mind, most likely. An idea that's 100% certain. Why not do something to make things unpleasant for Vladimir Putin? This is surely what they're betting on. So I expect a major fire in the center of Moscow in the near future. Absolutely everything will burn, and this is already inevitable. They brought this disaster into their own home when they started the war. They brought this disaster into their own home when they chose Vladimir Putin once again, when they helped him dismantle the constitution, when they helped him orchestrate Bucha, Hostomel, Irpin, Trostianets, Mariupol, and the rest of the list. They are the ones to blame for this. They brought this nightmare upon themselves. Now it won't just be hellish sanctions. Now it will be hell on earth. Trump promised hell on earth for Iran. But it turned out that hell on earth came to Vladimir Putin.
Friends, write in the comments what you think about the potential transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. That really would be a decisive game changer. Write what you think about the JASSM and about the phone call between Zelensky and Trump when Trump basically asked, why aren't you striking Moscow? President Zelensky said we have nothing to strike with. And now Trump is giving them something to strike with. Sasha, let me add a bit of a fly in the ointment to our barrel of honey. Military analysts reacted very harshly to the phrase 50-day sanctions. That is, the Senate was ready to impose them already at the end of July. So any day now. Now, all the American media have reported that the Senate is postponing it because 50 days means the beginning of September. And many military analysts immediately wrote that Trump simply allowed Putin to seize the entire Donbass, to continue his military actions, his offensive, expansionist, terrorist operation for those 50 days, and only after that would he do anything. In other words, there was some kind of agreement between Trump and Putin. Here are 50 days for you, take what you need, and then we'll impose sanctions. What do you think?
Dasha, you see, that's not how it works. If there had been a deal between Trump and Putin, the NATO Secretary General wouldn't have been in Washington. There wouldn't have been any negotiations between the Europeans and Trump. Keir Starmer wouldn't have been in Kyiv. You see, these days, right now, none of this would be happening, and no one would be giving anything to Ukraine. A backroom deal is formed in a completely different way. Why 50 days? Let me explain 3 specific reasons why it's 50 days. First, A shipment of weapons needs to arrive. Let me remind you, Trump gave Iran 60 days. On the 61st day, the Israelis launched a strike. But for that strike to happen, everything had to arrive first. That included American carrier groups that had to approach, as well as American fighter jets, American reconnaissance planes, American intelligence data, and the intelligence services had to do their job and figure out who was where, how they were positioned, and in which bunker Ayatollah Khomeini was hiding. It's the same situation here. 50 days are given to prepare, to stockpile weapons, to accumulate systems, to acquire anti-missile systems, and then to carry out strikes, retaliatory strikes, in response to what Vladimir Putin will do. 50 days. Yes, of course, Putin will strike. Obviously, he will try to advance in Donbass. These are obvious things, Dasha. But you see, this idea that Putin will take all of Donbass in 50 days, well, I'm definitely not a military expert or a military analyst. To me, these things are obvious. But in 3.5 years of war, Putin hasn't managed to seize Donbass. And in fact, since 2014, he hasn't been able to take Donbass. Why do we think he'll be able to do it in 50 days? That's the first point. Second, obviously, it's necessary to reach an agreement with India and China. Because right now, Trump is negotiating with both the Indians and the Chinese. And these negotiations are about tariffs. And here, the issue is trade. Lavrov came to Beijing after visiting North Korea, as you know. Right now, Lavrov is in Beijing negotiating with Xi Jinping, and the Chinese side has said that it will support Russia even more. Well, fine. If they support us more, they'll get sanctions. We're not talking about sanctions against Russia here. We're talking about secondary sanctions against China, against India, against purchasing countries, against companies and legal entities that buy oil, gas, nuclear materials, electricity, or coal from Russia, and so on down the list. That's what we're talking about, secondary sanctions. Targeting the purchasing countries, the countries that allow the Russian oil fleet to sell everything under the sun and to roam freely, that even directly enable certain financial transactions and allow goods to pass through their territories. Turkey, for example, Azerbaijan, Central Asia, China as well, and so on down the list. That's what we're talking about. About some countries of the European community, that's what we're talking about. That's why 50 days are given for negotiations so that everyone understands and makes that choice. Which side will they take? Officially, definitively, so that the game is clear to everyone. And thirdly, listen, in September, the official procedure for adopting the federal state budget begins. We need to understand whether Vladimir Putin will make any moves or not, what appropriations, what funds to allocate, what to allocate them for, how much to allocate to Ukraine for direct opposition to Putin. What will Putin do? It's necessary to assess now the behavior of the Kremlin dictator, the Russian troops, and so on. What will happen next? Well, they'll assess the situation and then they'll strike. There's simply no other way out of this situation. Vladimir Putin himself overturned this board. I think he now deeply regrets it. He's biting his nails and elbows and everything else he can bite. But the problem is, Dasha, that he's the one to blame for this whole story. He overdid it. He ruined everything. As the New York Times rightly put it. Now, very difficult, catastrophic times await Putin. There's another reason as well, Dasha. Putin started defending his elite at the wrong time. He killed the Minister of Transport, Starovoat, and went after the Chemezov clan, who until recently was his friend. He started cracking down once again on the Shoigu and Patrushev clans, and so on. He started going after them again. And these repressive measures are gaining more and more momentum. He started destroying his own elite at the wrong time, because right now the elite should be united. And when half of the elite fears for their lives, when ministers, 9 people, vote with their feet, vice premiers, ministers, top officials vote with their feet and come to Starovoy's funeral, and Putin mocks them, first saying that a wreath was sent, then taking his words back. And they understand that, well, soon enough, Lubyanka will come after their asses too. So what we're talking about is Trump's pressure, Russia's economic problems, and at the same time, possibly the beginning of some kind of coup, because the oligarchs who bankroll these ministers, the officials, and the military leadership all understand perfectly well that Putin started the fight, that Putin was the first to strike at them. If they don't respond, they're finished. Now, Trump will apply pressure, and they'll apply pressure too, and they'll destabilize the situation. I don't know, Dash, whether we will wake up tomorrow or the day after tomorrow to the news that tanks have entered Moscow and surrounded the Kremlin, and Putin is no more coup d'etat in Russia. Hooray! I don't know. But the fact is that they will act and watch how hard Trump takes on Putin and will dance from that. These 50 days are probably one of the most turbulent periods of this war, of this, the tension of this war. It won't be easy. It will be turbulent. And at times it will be tough. But for Putin, ultimately, these 50 days will end badly. These are fateful days for the war, for Ukraine. Yes, but these are dark and grim days for Vladimir Putin. Trump has no other way. To use Margarita Simonian's words, he can't back down. He simply can't anymore. And Putin will choke on it. And this is Vladimir Putin's fault. He himself is to blame for what happened.
Sasha, are Tomahawk missiles a reality in the coming months, or is that still unrealistic for now?
This is Trump raising the stakes. This is blackmail against Putin. Trump has shown him several times what the Tomahawk system is, what Tomahawk missiles are. He demonstrated this once in Syria when he destroyed, completely obliterated the Syrian bases where Russian military and Russian aircraft were stationed. He showed what American weapons are capable of with the example of the Wagner mercenaries, whom he wiped out as well. He showed what Tomahawks are with the example of Iran. And now he says, that's it. I'll send Tomahawks to both Zelensky and Ukraine. Hundreds of them. Take your pick. In other words, he's raising the stakes, yes. He's raising the stakes. But he doesn't want the war to truly turn into a global, large-scale one. He doesn't want to fight Putin directly, but he probably has to do it, or will have to do it. But for now, he's raising the stakes as high as they can go to the absolute limit. Trump has a higher ceiling of possibilities. He has a broader, wider range of maneuver. You see? He's showing Putin, I can even give Tomahawk. And you can't, you have nothing to counter these Tomahawks. Patriots are mine. Those are my Patriots. I have the best anti-missile systems, and you don't have them. If there has already been a strike on Siberia, and Siberia was burning, I don't know, for the second or third time in the last month, Dasha, you see, before Russia's territory was an asset, such a vast territory, it was almost impossible to get all the way across, right? You'd get as far as the Urals, and then somewhere out there, you just give up and turn back home. Now, Russia's vast territory is actually a disadvantage. It's a negative factor, because it's impossible to cover it with anti-drone and anti-missile systems, you see? It's impossible. That's why they'll cover Putin's back again, somewhere near the Kremlin. And all of Moscow will be burning. They'll cover St. Petersburg, but Siberia will be burning. Do you understand? So, Tomahawks are a real possibility in the future. After 50 days, when Putin says no, because most likely he will say no, he simply has no other option. He can't show weakness. He can't show his security forces, on whom he depends and on whom all his power is built. That, guys, I chickened out. I can't do it. He will go all the way, making mistake after mistake. But Trump will keep pressing further and further, together with the Europeans and everyone else. Ultimately, we will reach a situation where China will have to get directly and openly involved. Directly and openly involved. And we are already approaching that situation. The only question is, will it happen within these 50 days or after some additional period of time?
Yes, everyone is already saying that things are heating up in Sevastopol. Pro-Russian public pages in occupied Crimea are writing that Trump might strike Sevastopol with Tomahawk missiles replaced by JASSM. They're saying it's on the edge there too. Latest comments, Trump is considering supplying Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. They could reach Moscow and St. Petersburg. Panic is starting in the Kremlin and the propagandists are already howling. So this is exactly that zone of tension that's now rapidly developing in Russian military public pages. Tell me.
And notice further, Trump hasn't supplied anything yet. You see, this is a skill too. He hasn't done anything yet, and the Moscow Stock Exchange is already starting to fall. He hasn't done anything yet, and the public pages are already howling. He hasn't done anything yet, and already half of Moscow is being evacuated in Russia. He hasn't done anything yet, and already there's a problem starting in Crimea. And there aren't even any Tomahawks yet. And now, attention, imagine, friends, the situation. There are Tomahawks, and the Tomahawks are being launched. Just multiply all of this hysteria, by 10 or by 100, multiply it. They'll go insane. They aren't even here yet. And they're already starting to talk about how it's all just for show. And when they do show up, I don't know, they'll all just disappear. As soon as the Tomahawks start flying toward Moscow, the very first person to disappear from Moscow will be Dmitry Anatolievich Medvedev. He'll fly away. And that's already happened before. You're laughing, Dasha, but that's how it was. When Prigozhin was marching on Moscow through the Rostov region, who was the first to run away? Everyone else stayed. No one understood what was happening. Everyone stayed put. Everyone was scared. Who ran away? Putin and Medved. Putin and Medvedev. Putin took Medvedev by the hand because the constitution says that if anything happens, Medvedev also gets a lifetime term, that he is untouchable. Medvedev is the only president who is untouchable, besides Putin Medvedev. He took Medvedev by the hand, like a bride, and flew off with him in an unknown direction to some kind of bunker. And this time, as soon as Tomahawks or something else start flying toward Moscow or anywhere else, Medvedev will immediately vanish. He'll be gone right away, because everything about Dmitry Medvedev is just for show.
Sasha, did you notice how the NATO Secretary General totally trolled and mocked Medinsky during the negotiations? That's putting it pretty harshly, when they were discussing things with Trump. So Trump was trying to explain that, I called Putin and Putin says everything is fine. Then my wife Melania tells me that Kyiv is being bombed. So what's so good about that? But I believed him. And then the NATO Secretary General says to him, how can you believe them if they send Medinsky? And he starts spouting some kind of nonsense, pseudo-historical nonsense about Russia.
No, what they actually said was that Putin sent some crazy historian who started talking about the history of Russia, starting from the year 1245.
Yes.
I mean, of course, Trump at some point, someone told him about Medinsky, but he forgot about him. Medinsky is not the kind of person you need to remember. That's the truth. And Medinsky's books aren't the kind of books you need to keep rereading either. But it's just that, once again, Trump was shown that Putin sent some random people to negotiations and doesn't take the talk seriously. What does this tell us?
Yes.
It means that sooner or later, Putin, if he was told directly, look, if you go to negotiations, no more Medinskys. From now on, only the key figures, the people who make decisions, and you personally, I won't accept anything else. There's no room left for maneuver, Dasha. You can't send Medinsky, you can't send some random person from some unknown department or one of your advisors. You can't. Only top-level representatives. And only you personally, where your signature is at the end of the peace agreement and so on. Because Putin was basically given an ultimatum, either a peace agreement with Zelensky within 50 days, or I'll tear you and your regime to pieces. That's all that was conveyed to him. As for Melania Trump, we need to urgently check if she has any Ukrainian roots. I feel like this is exactly the kind of person who sits there. I can just picture the scene. I don't even know which one, but I can clearly imagine it. Trump comes home tired after work. He saw soccer for the first time. He visited some stadium. He cut some ribbon, I don't know. He drank some Coca-Cola, pressed the red button, and they brought him a Coke. The man is tired. He comes home up to the second floor of the White House. He comes into the house. Melania says, I had a wonderful conversation with Vladimir, with Putin. She says, can you imagine, Donald? Kyiv was hit. Lutsk was hit. So I think we finally found the person who really knows the geography of Ukraine well.
Sasha.
Who, right?
If I'm not mistaken, Melania Trump is the closest friend of Sasha Nikolaenko, Miss Ukraine, who is married to...
Who was at the inauguration?
Yes, and they even lived in the same room during the pageant. And if I'm not mistaken, it was actually Melania Trump who introduced Alexandra Nikolaenko, a Ukrainian Miss Ukraine, to her future husband. And later, of course, her husband and Donald Trump's business partner. As I understand it, if Melania Trump has any affection for Ukraine, it's connected specifically to Sasha Nikolaenko, since they are friends. And since Melania is European by origin, she should know European geography because she's not American. This is about how Trump fights against migrants, even though his wife is not American and was born in Europe.
Well, you see, for example, I personally wouldn't draw that connection regarding Sasha Nikolaenko. But if that's the case, then I want to tell you that Melania Trump and Trump himself basically have a daily review of the Ukrainian situation. And that's a good thing. If he has already said this directly, Dasha, it means that this information is reaching him. And that's also good. That's good, really.
Of course, we still need to discuss Putin's actions after all of this. So you have absolutely accurately conveyed the meaning of Dmitry Medvedev's post, which ends with the world-shuttled expert in the consequences, последствия, belligerent Europe was disappointed. Russia didn't care. In other words, Russia doesn't care. That's what Medvedev stated. But here's the question. What will Putin do if Medvedev is saying that Russia didn't care, meaning Russia doesn't care about all these words from Trump and all his threats?
Putin doesn't care. Putin will now try for 51 days to restore contact with Trump, but at the same time, he will keep striking Ukraine. These are two things that at first glance seem completely unrelated, but that's how it will be. In the end, nothing will work out for him. Listen, Trump negotiated with the Iranians for 60 days. He negotiated with the Iranians for 60 days. He talked to them. His representatives met with them. The media was telling everyone that he was putting direct pressure on Netanyahu. But in the end, it turned out that Mossad carried out 3 brilliant military special operations together with Israeli military intelligence. Then it turned out that Trump gathered troops and struck Iran. Putin can do whatever he wants, but weapons are going to Ukraine. And missiles will go to Russia, to Moscow, first and foremost. What is Vladimir Putin doing today, Dasha? That's what's interesting. We're missing this. So what is Vladimir Putin doing today? Let me tell you. Keith Kellogg, Trump's special representative on Ukraine, and a general arrived in Kiev. They say he'll be here for several days, maybe a week. We'll see. At the very moment he arrives in Kiev, Russia launches a drone that first flies into Ukrainian territory, then heads into Belarusian territory, flies over Belarus, returns, and from Belarusian territory, supposedly as if it were a Belarusian drone, flies into Ukraine to strike Chernihiv or Kiev from the north. At the moment, when Keith Kellogg is traveling to Kiev, so obviously Vladimir Putin wanted to provoke this situation and do everything possible to sever Lukashenko's ties with the Americans, with Trump, to break that connection. What does Lukashenko do? Attention! Lukashenko suddenly scrambles a helicopter and destroys the drone at the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. What does this mean? What does this tell us? This shows that Vladimir Putin still wants to drag Lukashenko into this war, to do everything to neutralize Lukashenko, gain control over Belarus, and send his army through Belarusian territory. To use Belarus as a staging ground either against NATO forces in the east more precisely, in the west or directly for Putin himself, or directly against Ukraine from the north. But Dasha, what we are talking about is that Vladimir Putin has clearly realized that Lukashenko is backing out, that Lukashenko is trying to distance himself, that Lukashenko doesn't want to be tied to Putin right now, that Lukashenko has started actively flirting with Trump, and that Lukashenko has been promised something very tempting. And Lukashenko doesn't want to lose sight of that tempting offer. He doesn't. And Putin really wants Lukashenko to break away from Trump. Did you notice? Here is one of the most important pieces of news that came from Trump, aside from the Ukrainian topic. During his speech in the Oval Office with Mark Rutte and the NATO Secretary General, he said that the United States is directly influencing and was the party that reconciled, that began the process of reconciliation and drafting a peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In other words, Trump is taking the Caucasus away from Putin. America is taking the Caucasus away from Putin. So we wondered, how and why is all this happening? Trump. That's why all this is happening. So, attention, Dasha, Finland, Sweden NATO base. Petersburg is surrounded. NATO troops are practically at the gates of Petersburg. Soon there will be a border breakthrough. At the same time, British and French troops will be in Ukraine, along with troops from 28 other NATO member countries. After the beginning of the ceasefire, the period of silence. Attention, there will be a Turkish NATO base in Azerbaijan. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Gyumri base, the Russian base in Gyumri, Armenia, disappears. If Armenia shuts down all Russian bases on its territory. What do I think? I think that Vladimir Putin, who has clearly realized that he cannot get Ukraine, no matter how hard he tries, now wants to prolong the war. But it's one thing when you play to deplete Ukraine's reserves and resources, and another thing when you play to deplete America's reserves and resources. They are not comparable. You have far fewer resources and you will lose this war if Trump gets involved. And he turned on. Therefore, he will look for other opportunities for himself. I think there are 2 options to consider. 3 options. The first option is a full-scale attempt to occupy Belarus and to destroy the Lukashenko regime and Lukashenko himself. The second is a direct attempt to undermine Armenia and possibly even an attempt to occupy Armenia. And the third scenario is the start of a military campaign against Georgia. I think in the near future, we may witness these very scenarios. Putin will choose one of these scenarios for himself because the population, the plebs, needs something to be shown on television. And now this is what they'll be showing.
Sasha, a quick off-topic note. There's a whole piece out about Melania Trump, as they say, we're at the forefront. The Times is writing about it. It's a big article. Zelensky has gained an unexpected ally in the White House, Melania Trump. According to the publication, she actively reminds Trump about the victims of Russian strikes. In February 2022, she publicly called the killing of peaceful Ukrainians horrible and tragic, the killing of peaceful Ukrainians. While Trump called Putin smart and brilliant, Melania called him a fiend, constantly appealed to her followers to help Ukraine, and as noted, has much more political influence over her husband than previously thought. It is pointed out that despite the presence of numerous security and foreign policy advisors, her voice can be decisive. Trump listens to certain people, especially those close to him, and even more so if their last name is Trump. Sasha, what do you think?
I'll say that we've gained an unexpected ally. No one saw this coming. We've gained an unexpected ally. And that's actually good news, Dasha. You know, it's actually very, very nice indeed. Because for a considerably long period of time, Ukraine was actively looking for effective ways, practical approaches to genuinely convince the former president, Donald Trump, and it turned out there was no need to look that hard. It turned out that the First Lady can simply, bypassing everyone else, come and say, Donald, it's time to be done with Volodymyr Putin, end it with him. I don't like him. And as it turns out, that's enough for Trump. That's much more than all the negotiations with Putin, more than the persuasion from the Senate, Congress, and so on. More than Elon Musk, who's half crazy. It turned out that Melania Trump alone is enough. That's very good news for Ukraine, Dasha, isn't it? I don't know what will happen next. I don't know what level of influence she'll have, how she will continue to support or not support Ukraine. But as things stand today, if thanks to Melania Trump, Ukraine receives deadly missiles and full protection of Ukrainian airspace, 17 Patriots, and even Tomahawk missiles, then she deserves a monument in the center of Kyiv and a street named after Melania Trump.
Yes, you're right, Sasha. And most importantly, you always say that Putin did certain things with his underwear and slapped Trump across the face with it. And The Atlantic completely agrees with you, because The Atlantic also wrote about the reasons for the increased US aid to Ukraine. Putin officially humiliated Trump, just outright humiliated him, and Trump can't get over it. Here you go, a public humiliation.
I think, by the way, Melania told Trump about this too. Listen, he's just humiliating you. And that was the end of it, you see? And then things started moving, Dasha. Here we are, talking and talking. Things have started moving. So what's the conclusion? The action has begun. They wanted action. They can't live without. Well, here you go. Get your action. Go ahead. Keep moving.
Look, the news is breaking, and while we're streaming, Germany might buy a Typhoon launcher from the US to launch Tomahawk missiles. So, as I understand it, Tomahawk is our new buzzword now, right? Now, that's all we talk about.
Look, Dasha. So what does this indicate? It indicates that Trump has broken loose. Now he's going to blackmail Putin every single day. Remember, Solovyov was recently shouting about 2 Poseidons that would drown America with a nuclear wave. Just a few days ago, Solovyov was shouting about this. America doesn't need any Solovyov. They've got Trump. Now Trump has more different kinds of weapons than Russia does. Now Trump will tell absolutely everyone in the world, every day, about the very best, the most powerful weapon systems and how Russia will burn with the help of these weapon systems. And now imagine 50 days of this targeted informational bombardment of the Kremlin, Medvedevs, and everyone else. There's a significant chance that even before these 50 days are up, someone in the Kremlin will throw up their hand. Because, such an information attack, they are quite unlikely to withstand it, honestly. They are more likely to mess themselves up quite badly.
Sasha, to sum up, what do you think will happen in Europe? Right now, Germany is being called Ukraine's main ally because almost all supplies will go through Germany. This is very important. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has also done a lot, but Europe is in no way voting on the new 18th package of sanctions. Once again, Fico is in a frenzy, Orban and others too. Malta has joined in, basically Russian enclaves in Europe. What should we do, and will oil prices finally go down?
Trump will deal with these guys if Putin actually pushes him all the way. Because if anyone has direct influence over Orban and Fico, it's Trump. Moreover, if he turns a blind eye to certain things, the European Union will put the squeeze on them. When Germany, for example, stops supplying cars from Hungary, Orban will raise the white flag and say, I agree to everything. This has already happened when he was blackmailed with cars, with automobiles. He immediately made all the necessary pro-Ukrainian decisions. Remember that situation when former German Chancellor Olaf Scholz told him to take a walk in the hallway while the vote was going on? He'll be taking more walks if necessary. You know, Dasha, a lot has changed in the last few days. The board has been flipped over. We still don't fully understand that this is a new stage in the war, and this stage is clearly not in Vladimir Putin's favor. A lot has changed. So much has changed. The pace is just insane. A terrifying pace. There was only this kind of momentum at the very beginning of the big war, at the start of the invasion, probably in the first 6 months to a year. What we're seeing now is a new impulse. Everyone was hoping there would be some kind of reconciliation. There was hope. Trump probably also had not hope, but rather an illusion, or at least thoughts that he could make a deal with Putin, that there would be a deal and in principle he could even profit from Russia. The deal is over. The illusions are over. And now there's a new impulse. It seems Trump actually enjoyed waging war. Trump probably liked the image of Moscow burning. I don't know how long that image will stay in his mind. Maybe a day, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 years, I don't know. But that he'll take it out on Putin, that's 100% certain. What will happen in Russia now? Flames. What will happen in America now? A desire to ignite those flames. What will happen in Europe now? A desire to help ignite those flames. What will happen in Ukraine now? A new impulse, a renewed hope that Vladimir Putin's regime will finally collapse. And I'm incredibly glad about this, because I repeat every single time, freedom and hope are the last things Vladimir Putin can try to take from us, but he will never succeed.
A wonderful ending, dear audience. Sasha and I work for you in the Dasha plus Sasha, Sasha plus Dasha format twice a week. Write a few kind words in support of our tandem. I know you leave a lot of different comments. I read them and give them hearts. So thank you very much. Let us know where you're watching from. Share your location in the comments. Every Tuesday, Sunday, Wednesday, and Monday, we are on my YouTube channel, Dasha Shaslivaya, and on Dmitry Gordon's YouTube channel with top analyst Alexander Demchenko. Sasha, thank you so much, and see you again this weekend.
Until next time. Bye.